North stings the corner. You know it's coming. You still can't stop it.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Lacrosse Rundown. It's Tuesday night. It's 8 o'clock. I am Charlotte North, and this is ESPN's Jay Alter. And tonight we have quite literally what I think is going to be our best episode yet. We are bringing in an NIL expert. Now, we've heard you guys in the comment section. We've heard you guys in the lacrosse community talking about name, image, and likeness, wondering maybe what it is, how it's impacting our sport. Maybe you've seen things throughout, the newspapers and headlines, and you may be just as confused as the next person because it's a lot to digest. But we are bringing in an expert in this space, Luke Fedlam. He is one of the nation's leading sports lawyers and NIL experts, and he is joining our show today, fresh off of a big piece of news that just came out that we'll touch on. But he's joining the Lacrosse Rundown to educate all of us on what NIL is and how it's affecting our sport and what it's going to look like in the future. So everybody, please welcome in Luke Fedlam.
A huge welcome to Luke Fedlam, one of the nation's leading sports lawyers in the NIL space and the attorney behind the landmark Ohio high school NIL ruling. Just happened yesterday. So, Luke, this interview could not be better timed. Congratulations. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you guys so much for having me. And yeah, it's been quite a busy time lately, but NIL is here, baby. Let's go.
And I've been looking at this high school ruling in Ohio, which you've been working so hard on, and just your background. If you could just give our audience kind of a brief overview of what made you on the legal side get so into name, image, and likeness and make sure that athletes at every level get legal access to what they deserve.
First of all, thank you for that question, because I don't think I get to share that often. So I got involved in name, image, and likeness. A lot of times people will say like, oh, it's such a crazy time now, so it makes sense for you to get involved. But I got involved in NIL back in 2019. And that's when California first passed its NIL law at the state level. And it wasn't set to go into effect for 4 years till 2023. But I knew once California passed it, it was going to become a reality at the college level for sure, because the NCAA bylaws aren't going to be able to trump a state law. So for me, it was like, I've worked with athletes for so long in my career at the professional side. I'm like, this is going to bring some and for protection for college athletes and everybody in that ecosystem. So involved and started talking about it back in 2019. And then, as we all know, 2020 got a little crazier with Florida. And then 21, it became a reality. And then years go in high school, state associations. So it's just, I've just been fortunate enough to be in the center of a lot of these changes.
I have been, in awe of the NIL space as it's evolved, but to me, it's still wildly misunderstood. What are the biggest misconceptions that you hear, whether it be fans, parents, players, coaches, about what NIL actually is and what it isn't?
Yes. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's just purely a pay for play kind of thing. And that's not the case. Now, we have seen some examples where NIL certainly can be confused with pay for play. But when we think about it, NIL in terms of name, image, and likeness has existed for decades, right? This idea that an individual, let's take athletics out of it, that an individual can be compensated and should be compensated for the use of their name, their image, their likeness. If we think of any celebrity or any individual that is promoting a brand that we've ever seen in commercials, etc., that's what name, image, and likeness fundamentally and legally is. It's the licensing of someone's name, their image, their likeness to a third party for compensation. It's become branded much more around athletes being able to get paid, just this kind of, just calling it NIL. And I think that what's important to understand is that when collectives came about, the idea of NIL really did change, because it changed from a student athlete being able to now do social media influencing or partnering with a brand or a company and getting paid for that, to okay, we want to, as an institution and fans, donors, alumni, boosters of an institution, we want to recruit the best talent we can, and we want to retain that talent. So we're going to pay them, and we'll do it now under this umbrella of name, image, and likeness. That's caused a lot of, I think, misconceptions for people when they think of or hear NIL.
No, it's a great answer, because when Charlotte was a senior, coming off a national championship, coming back to Boston College, like, her name, image, and likeness deserved compensation, right?
Absolutely.
She should be able to go run a camp or sign autographs. And I think that is in the merit of what you're talking about. Now, we hear it, and you're right, the misconception is you hear it in the context of, okay, big-time college football player, big-time college basketball players getting paid 7 figures to just play the sport. Do you think that maybe we could work bottom up here in terms of putting on those guardrails that you're talking about? Hey, they've got it right at the college lacrosse level, or, college golf level. Like, they're actually using it in the spirit of NIL to create some sort of guardrail to regulate this. Is that possible?
I think so. I mean, I think if we really got back to basics, and I think that's what you're talking about when you say ground up, right? It really is the basic fundamental understanding of, if I have value that I can bring to a company or a brand for them to reach more followers, reach more customers for the products or services that I'm selling, and I can do that by partnering with a student athlete. That is fundamental name, image, and likeness. And your point about Charlotte is exactly right? When there are certain student athletes that, regardless of sport, and sometimes regardless of athletic ability, have the opportunity to be able to garner that attention. And I think that when we say that that's name, image, and likeness, and those are the guardrails we should allow for really true name, image, and likeness, then I think that is a great place to start. What we have become, though, is much more of this, hey, we're going to pay, to your point, the football, basketball, star athletes, these big, millions of dollars. But I think what we're also seeing, though, too, is there are some institutions where that mindset has also come downstream to some other sports that are non-revenue producing. Mm-hmm. And so there are some volleyball teams, softball teams, lacrosse, etc., where there might be a booster, a donor, an alum who says, I want to make sure that the student athletes on that team can participate. So I think to your point, it's about, how do we still keep the true essence of what name, image, and likeness is about, try to protect that and allow student athletes to engage in that way.
You bring up non-revenue generating sports, and that's, a big topic that I wanted to hear your thoughts on. People assume that NIL is just for, the big football and basketball programs, but we're seeing it affect, our sport in lacrosse and other non-revenue generating sports across the college landscape and the high school landscape. But it's entered, the recruiting process and all these other different avenues in these sports, especially lacrosse. So for you, what would, a high school player or a college player in a sport like lacrosse, what are some of the opportunities that they could potentially expect or have their eyes on as they enter this, new era?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I share with student athletes, really at all levels, at the high school level, at the college level, is to think about what is it that if you want to engage in name, image, and likeness, what is it that you want it to do for you, right? There are some athletes that'll say, I just want to make money. Okay, great. Well, that maybe leads you down one particular path. Or there are other student athletes that will say, I want to expand and grow my followers, or I want to create lasting relationships that could lead to an internship or a job after I graduate, right? Name, image, and likeness allows for all of those things to happen. So I think it's important for student athletes to say, okay, what is it that I wanted to do? And if it's that I want to make money, I want to kind of get some business exposure in my student athlete experience, then what are those brands? What are those companies that are already authentic to me? And I talk about that all the time. Like, authenticity matters. If there's a particular hair care product that you use every day anyway, if there's a particular restaurant that you like to eat at, a particular place you like to shop for clothes, right? These are things that are already authentic to you. So what a great opportunity to be able to reach out and try to build a collaboration or a relationship with that particular company or brand. And oftentimes, especially at the high school level, and I've had these conversations just recently, throughout the state of Ohio, which is if you're a high school student athlete, you might look at what are the local companies local to your community that makes sense for you to say, if there's a pizza place that you like to eat at, all right, after school, after practice, what a great place to start, because that pizza shop owner probably wants more students to come in and buy pizza from them. So it could make sense to use you as a student athlete to promote that. It's the same thing at the college level, whether it's food, whether it's apparel, whether it's products. And so not all student athletes do $1 million deals. There are a lot of student athletes that are getting paid in product, right, in apparel, and also in cash. So having that big picture understanding of NIL, I think, helps student athletes not be intimidated by the fact that regardless of sport, you absolutely can engage in name, image, and likeness.
Luke, hearing you talk is so positive when it comes to NIL. And I feel like so much of the conversation gets turned negative. So it's just such a breath of fresh air to hear your approach to it. And particularly just because there's so much uncertainty out there. When we hear from our audience, it's just almost, I've heard NIL, but I don't truly understand it. Why I wanted to have you on is because you take such an education approach to NIL and protection, because we've all heard the horror stories of people getting taken advantage of. So if you're a family or a student athlete listening to this right now, what should they focus on first to avoid getting taken advantage of and making those smart decisions early where they can get on the right path?
Yeah. And I will say to your question, in the build up to your question, I take such a positive approach to NIL because I think it really is a conduit to help individual student athletes and their families learn life skills that are so important, to understand budgeting, money management, branding, responsible social media usage, right? Taxes, understanding these things that are life skills that, especially at the college level, we want young people to get anyway, right? So that they can then be successful when they leave college. So I take the positive approach because I do think that there's quite an educational component to this. But the one thing I would say to your question is I would tell families, come up with your plan. Like, come up with your plan for name, image, and likeness, because it's very easy to get wooed or attracted or get distracted, maybe even by someone coming and bringing something to you. But if that thing that they're bringing to you isn't what's part of your plan, then you want to be really mindful of that. I'll use some examples. I talk with families where they'll say, oh my gosh, an agent reached out and want to represent us in this name, image, and likeness space. And they're so excited because if an agent reaches out, then we must be doing something good, and this is going to be great, right? Without realizing, number one, that then when I ask them to see the contract is trash, and takes advantage of them. But you can get so excited because you feel like, oh my gosh, I can't believe somebody wants to actually represent us out here. So think about your plan. If your plan is to say, you know what, for this year of school, maybe I'm a high school senior moving into my freshman year, or I'm going to be a college student athlete. What's the plan? Maybe the plan is I'm not going to go out and seek any deals. If deals come to me, we can evaluate those one-on-one. Any deal that comes to me will get sent to my parents. We'll talk about it. We'll review and see how that fits into our plan. Or it could say, you know what, I'm going to use my first year to try to build relationships and build kind of the brand on social media that I want to have, or start reaching out to different companies and brands to build relationships. I think if you have a plan, it's much easier to be protected as you navigate this NIL ecosystem than simply allowing happenstance to kind of direct you, because then you end up trying to follow whatever cool, shiny new object comes your way, and that's not always in your best interest. I'll say this to your listeners: there are no real regulations when it comes to NIL marketing agents, right? It just doesn't exist. If you talk about player representation agents for professional leagues, usually there's some collective bargaining agreement that governs that. But there are so many NIL marketing agents that are just popping up that just because somebody reaches out to you does not mean that they're trustworthy and doesn't mean that they have your best interest at heart. Last tip. I got to stop because I'll keep going.
It's so good.
Thank you. One tip I want to give is this. Sometimes different schools engage in revenue share in different ways because schools that, especially Power 4 schools that have to engage in revenue share, they pick the sports. And so depending on the sports they have, depending on the system, determines the actual sports that they're going to share in revenue with. If there's an agent that's trying to represent your son or daughter or you as a student athlete, and you have a school deal, whether that's a revenue share deal from the school, whether that's an NIL, institutional NIL deal from the school or from the collective, do not allow an agent to take 20% of that deal. Don't do it. That school is most likely going to pay you that amount regardless of an agent being involved or not. And I've seen so many times where agents are trying to get an ungodly percentage of a deal that would have already existed without that agent even being involved.
So interesting and such good advice really for our listeners, because again, we have, listeners that play lacrosse at every level, both men and women.
Yep.
And so this is so insightful for them. And, the landscape has shifted so much, in just the past few months, let alone past few years. We've had the collectives, like you mentioned, we've had revenue sharing come up and now some employment models across the board. When you look ahead, for our listeners, for the next 3 to 5 years, let's call it, where do you see NIL going? And do you see this type of change continuing to happen? Or maybe do we settle into something a little bit more structured?
I thought you were going to say, what do you see in the next 3 to 5 minutes? Because I feel like that's everything is changing. Next 3 to 5 years is so hard. I mean, because I think that there is a lot of challenge. I'll use this as an example. The NCAA President Charlie Baker sent a letter to Congress a few weeks ago, basically saying we need Congress to step in. And the reason is because they're getting sued left and right on every single different bylaw, etc. Now, I get questioned a lot, like, should the NCAA still exist, et cetera. It doesn't matter whether the NCAA exists or not, because there's always going to be some association that governs fair competition across schools, et cetera, whether you call it the NCAA or something else. That being said, I think at a certain point, we have to recognize some truths that exist. Number one, student athletes will continue to get paid, period. What that model looks like, I think, will continue to evolve. I think we will have, in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll have federal courts and likely the Supreme Court come out with some ruling as to whether or not student athletes should be categorized as employees. We know that's happening in district court right now. It went up to the Third Circuit on a legal question. It went back to the district court. I think that's going to resolve itself, and we're going to see where the courts land on that. And I think that will get resolved. I think we'll also we'll likely see some form of federal legislation. And again, we're talking about the next 3 to 5 years, some form of federal legislation around name, image, and likeness, not preventing NIL from happening or stopping it in any way. We're already the horses out of the barn, as they say, on that already, but more so just to protect the association of colleges and universities, right? Let's call it the NCAA for now. But I think that's what we're going to see, some form of legislation to try to, again, we're still operating with different states having different laws around NIL, some states not even having laws around it. So schools are constantly pushing the envelope. Let's be clear, because schools are not blameless in all of this, and the NCAA certainly is not blameless in all this. Mm-hmm. The NCAA, if I were to give you my 2 cents off of the soapbox, would be to say they should have dealt with this back in 2009 and 10 during the Ed O'Bannon time. They had the perfect opportunity to say, hey, you know what? Student athletes should get paid, and here's what we're going to allow, and they could have set the rules. Instead, courts now have gotten involved, and so they really are kind of have their hands tied behind their back at the NCAA level. So I think we'll see some federal congressional intervention into name, image, and likeness, but I don't think it's going to be too severe as it relates to NIL, I think what they're going to use is to try to figure out how do we protect the NCAA so that it can still exist. And number two, I think Congress will get involved on that side also to say student athletes are not employees, right? And then the courts will figure that out, and we'll figure out what that looks like.
I totally agree with you, Luke, because if you look at it, everybody's been reacting to everything, the change, whereas they could have gotten out in front of it, set all the guardrails that people want, and instead we could have had a much more organized system, everything that you were talking about. The one point that I want to go back to just before we let you go is I loved what you said. Don't let people take advantage of you. Hey, I can get you all this money when you probably would have gotten that money anyway. And I think we're going to get to a point in the next couple of years where when you're going through a recruiting process, you should know what your value is and what the school has to offer you. And there should be a range. And because right now, the number one thing we get is, well, how much money do they have? Because we're hearing these crazy numbers.
Right.
And a lot of times the number that actually gets put in front of somebody, particularly at the college and high school lacrosse level, is a smaller amount. It's better than zero. So it's better than it was a few years ago, but it's not these 6-figure amounts that you're seeing in other sports yet. And I still think there is a misconception out there of, hey, you're going to get a huge recruiting package and this, and this.
Right.
I just think in 3 to 5 years, it would be great if you kind of knew what the cap room, so to speak, was going into a recruiting process.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we're starting to experience more and more information around that, around what an institution has, what the package to athletes will be. Even along those lines, one of the things I still tell families is don't let name, image, and likeness and money decide where you're going to go to school, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when if you're an athlete that is either playing a sport or based on your athletic ability, you're likely not going to be playing professionally, then certainly go back to the basics of you go to school to set yourself up for the best opportunity for whatever is next. And I think that, again, you still have to make sure NIL is going to be a part of your recruiting decision, just like coaching staff, playing time, academics, geography, all those other things that we use to make those decisions. I think that we are seeing more and more that various sports and coaches are able to say during the recruiting process, hey, this is what we have available. I think it's a matter of whether that becomes more transparent and that people can make decisions based on that. And also the more information that gets shared, which I think is one of the hardest things, right? Because coaches can tell one family one thing and another family something else. But the more there's transparency in that information and transparency in what's available financially, I think it just empowers families to make a more educated decision.
So important. You mentioned not making a decision based on one factor. That's something all these recruits are hearing throughout the recruiting process, but, to have NIL be a factor, but not the number one,
Yes.
thing that's deterring you or steering you in a direction. So important. Same thing with coaching staffs. Things can change all the time. And it's about, where you are going to, feel happy and want to go, out there and achieve your goals. So I love that. And listening to you has been so incredible. Just the advice, the knowledge, all of it. We can't thank you enough. And honestly, what you're doing for athletes out there, how you're representing them and how you're helping them, it's very admirable and inspiring.
Thank you so much. I love these conversations. I love what you all are doing, just bringing this information to your listeners, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges when it comes to education is where can you go to get independent and objective information and education in a way that's not, skewed towards somebody's benefit. So keep doing what you're doing. Thanks for having me. And I would love to come back again.
Awesome, Luke. Thank you so much. And I appreciate your positivity. It's refreshing. I think there's too much negativity in what ultimately should be a positive, right? Athletes finding a legal outlet to capitalize on a skill that they have and an audience that they've grown. And thank you for making it digestible, easy to understand, and educating everyone today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, guys. Take care.
All right. We told you guys it was going to be one of our best episodes yet. And
that was amazing.
Luke was incredible. I feel so much more educated and just inspired about this whole landscape that's moving, in a positive direction. As you said, Luke was so insightful and gave great advice, honestly.
I feel like that needs to be shared, not just in the college lacrosse community and high school lacrosse community, but across college sports. I mean, Luke laid it out so clearly, and he mentioned guardrails. I mean, it needs to happen. And I think we're seeing it when you talk about the athletes that are cashing in on NIL in our sport. It is more in the traditional using that name, image, and likeness with brands that they are passionate about. I feel like it does get misconstrued in other sports that it's pay for play. And I think there are a lot of rumors that fly around. If you look at this last recruiting cycle, even Charlotte, about, oh, this recruit's getting X amount of dollars. Is pay for play going to trickle down into lacrosse? And will there be guardrails that get there before that? So this is going to be an evolving topic, year after year, as Luke alluded to, and ever changing day by day. So really cool to hear his perspective on that. And I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as we did.
I love it. I love it. Seriously, one of my favorite guests that we've ever brought on. And I can't thank him enough for his time, especially after, the ruling that he just received a day ago.
I mean, he's coming off his national championship win. This is like talking to you after you win a national championship.
He's so kind to share his time in a busy week, I guess a busy couple of days, but really we know it was much longer than that. But he's representing athletes, and he knows exactly how to navigate this landscape. And so I hope you guys enjoyed it. We love bringing guests on that help you guys understand different topics in the sport. But all of sports, like you mentioned, on the whole, this is a topic that's being discussed everywhere. So we appreciate his time. And, we're coming off a week where we were both traveling for the sport of lacrosse, both down in Florida. You were at the IWLCA convention. For those of you who don't know, the coaches convention, all Division 1, 2, and 3 coaching staffs go down for a convention every year. And this year it was in Florida, in Bradenton, Sarasota area. And then there was a huge tournament where high school athletes competed, some middle school athletes competed. And then I was at training camp with Team USA.
Which looked awesome. Pictures and videos that came out of that looked spectacular. I look at those pictures, Charlotte, and I'm sure you kind of catch yourself, I'm sure at moments, standing on that field, looking around like, this is the most talent the sport has ever had on one field. It's just so incredible. To insane. Be surrounded in that environment, I'm sure.
It's ridiculous. Literally, everywhere you look, there are plays being made. We had 2 open practices, I believe, 2 open sessions where fans and players who were playing in the high school tournament could come watch, coaches could come watch. And then we played in our blue-white scrimmage on the final day, and that was open to the public. It was a packed house, standing room only. I mean, it was unbelievable. Just because, we could feel the energy from everybody who was playing in games around us come to one field and celebrate, awesome plays and the high level of competitive energy and, where our sport is today. So it was a phenomenal weekend. I look around and pinch myself every single time I get to be out there with the national team and around those athletes and coaches. It's just so inspiring. Everybody is working tirelessly to be the best version of themselves, be the best teammate within these training camps. And we're learning and we're growing and we're soaking in all the knowledge from our coaches. Like, it's truly the best time ever. And we have fun out there. So I'm just grateful to be in the position that I'm in.
No, it's awesome watching you doing what you do best with your spectacular Team USA teammates. And I was down there, you mentioned, speaking to the coaches, Charlotte, about this white paper project, which just came out last week. Coaches decided to put this together because they feel like it's a pivotal time in this sport. And there were 5 pillars that came out of it. And these are 5 pillars that I want to talk about, not just share today, but as we go forward into this new college lacrosse season, to kind of keep in the back of our minds. And it's to unify all 3 divisions, simplify the rules, attract and retain excellent officials, enhance championship weekend, and expand and maximize media exposure. And obviously I know the most about the 5th one. And honestly, I thought about the Lacrosse Rundown. Like, this is a place that we started almost a year ago February, where it didn't exist. And we don't feel like there's something that is equivalent to this, that has the depth of conversations that we do every Tuesday night and talk like we just did with NIL, you know, and I just feel like we're going to keep moving it in the right direction. And I just wanted to thank everybody for being a part of it, and thank you, Charlotte, for doing this on your channel, because when you talk about, you know, maximizing media exposure, it's conversations like these that'll move the sport forward.
Yeah, truly. I mean, you know, thank you for all your work that you do in the broadcast world for our sport. And then also, you know, here on the Lacrosse Rundown, it's amazing to see the growth in the media exposure, and to see, you know, the potential of where we could be when you look at some of the other sports and their track record of, you know, how they grew into one of the top 5 sports in the world. And I firmly believe, you know, lacrosse is going to be there very soon, maybe sooner than people would anticipate. And some of these, you know, things that were highlighted in the white paper project are exactly what, you know, our sport needs, exactly, you know, the type of research that we need to kind of look backwards and then look at the present day, and then, you know, kind of construct a plan to move forward, and hope that, you know, all these things that were brought to light by the amazing crew that led the white paper project and the IWLCA, everybody involved, just an insanely incredible job across the board. So informative, again, so digestible, easy to understand, and easy to process, you know, where we're at and where we could be, and all the different changes that could come about. It's so important to have these conversations. And again, you guys are just as much a part of the conversation as any of us, because, you know, you're fans of the sport. Maybe you play the sport, or you did play the sport, or you have somebody that you know that plays. You know, you guys are very much a part of this community, and very much a part of the lacrosse community that is helping the sport grow and get to where we believe it can be. So we thank you guys again. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please drop a comment, a question, maybe a guest that you want to see, if another topic, you know, similar to NIL, that you guys want to know more about, or hear more about. You know, we've got some incredible people and contacts who would love to come on the show and help educate, you know, us and you guys about all these different things going on in the sports world. But truly the best part of the week. So thank you guys. Thanks, Jay. And happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I was going to say happy. We're talking about thanks every sentence. Well, happy Thanksgiving, Charlotte, and happy Thanksgiving, everyone out there.
Hope you guys have a great one.